Alright, so these free courts was first instituted by Charlemagne, right? First instituted by Charlemagne. Alright, let's go. This is Eliphaz Levi, page 202. It says, in those days more of feudal tyrants were in league with sectarians against lawful authority. Female sorcerers were attached to castles as courtesans, bandits who frequented the Sabbaths, divided with nobles the blood-stained loot of rapine. Feudal courts were at the command of the highest bidder, and the public burdens weighed with all their force only on the weak and poor. The evil was at its height in Westphalia, and faithful agents were dispatched thither by Charlemagne, entrusted with a secret mission. Whatsoever energy remained among the oppressed, whosoever still loved justice, whether among the people or among the nobility, were drawn by these emissaries together, bound by pledges and vigilance in common. To the initiates thus incorporated, they made known the full powers which they carried from the emperor himself, and they proceeded to institute the tribunal of free judges. So these secret courts, free judges, they were instituted to put a damper on all of the lawlessness that was taking place during those dark ages. Okay, because you had a lot of sorcery and witchcraft, all of that stuff, divination taking place. You had a lot of bandits, okay, because you had the guy Robin Hood, right? Maybe Robin Hood wasn't such a great guy after all, you never know, but they made him out to be this hero in Hollywood. But anyway, continuing on, it says they were a kind of secret police, right? Like the Sungu Sungu, right? The secret police, the police and all. It says having the right of life and death, the mystery which surrounded their judgments, the swiftness of their executions, helped to impress the imagination of people still in barbarism, right? The holy vim assumed gigantic proportions. Men shuddered in describing apparitions of masked persons. Okay, so what that sound like to you, man? An apparition of a masked person. That's a phantom right there, man. Okay, that's going back into the phantom myth right there, man, that I brought out in the last video. So we know the phantom wore a mask. Hold on, let me get that real quick. This is wikipedia.org. Alright, phantom character. Let's go down real quick. Alright, costume and under costume and weapons, it says as part of the official uniform, the phantom wears, right, a black domino mask. So this is what they was wearing, something like this, to look and appear as some strange apparition, man, a phantom. Okay, it says in a purple skin-tight bodysuit. So this is the whole idea that this creator of the phantom got his idea from it. This is why he wears a mask, right? That's why he looks like that. Okay, with the mask, with a domino mask on his face, man. Okay. continuing on. It said the holy vim assumed gigantic proportions. Men shuddered in describing apparitions of masked persons, of summonses nailed to the doors of nobles in the very midst of their watch guards and their orgies, of brigade chiefs found dead with the terrible cruciform dagger in their breasts, and on a scroll attached thereto an extract from the sentence of the holy vim. That was the citations that they would attach to their victims, man. This sound like also during the Roman Empire, when the Messiah was on the scene, you had a secret society also known as the Sicarii. And they were what? They were called Sicarii men, dagger men. They had daggers, they carried around daggers, man. And they were against the Roman government of that time, man. Right? So this holy vim, which most likely is Simeon and Levi as well as the Sicarii were. Okay? They carried around daggers as well, man. You know what I'm saying? So they mask their faces, right? To appear as an apparition or a phantom. That's why the phantom is also called the ghost who walks. Right down here, wearing a costume based on the demon god, Christopher became the first incarnation of what would later be known as the Phantom. When he died, his son took over for him. When the second Phantom died, his son took over, and so on. So it would go on through the centuries, causing people to believe that the Phantom was immortal. These people gave him nicknames including the ghost who walks. Right? That's an apparition, man. And the man who cannot die. Alright, so this phantom character is tying in also with the holy vim, man. The secret tribunals. The secret courts. So back to Eliphaz Levi, page 202. Alright. It says the tribunal affected most fantastic forms of procedure. The guilty person cited to appear at some discredited crossroad was taken to the assembly, right? See? The assembly. Oh, my soul. Come not down to their secret unto their assembly. It says, was taken to the assembly by a man clothed in black. Because black is the color of judgment, right? Who bandaged his eyes. That was the mask, man. That's that domino mask. And led him forward in silence. This occurred invariably at some unseemly hour of the night, for judgment was never pronounced except at midnight. The criminal was carried into a vast underground vault, where he was questioned by one voice. The hoodwink was removed, the vault was illuminated in all its depth and height, and the free judges sat masked and wearing black vestures. See this, man? This is the holy vim. It says, sometimes these formidable assemblies were so crowded that they were comparable to an army of avengers. Alright? One night, the emperor himself presided over the secret tribunal, and more than 1,000 free judges sat in a circle around him. Right? Knights of round kind of stuff, right? In the year 1400, 10,000 members existed in Germany. Right? We already established the ancient Germans were black. People with a bad conscience suspected their own relations and friends. William of Brunswick is reported to have said on a certain occasion that Duke Adolphus of Schleswig should pay me a visit, I must infallibly hang him, as I do not wish to be hanged. Frederick of Brunswick, a prince of the same family, who was emperor for a moment, refused to obey a citation of the free judges, and from that time forward he went armed from head to foot and surrounded by guards. One day, however, he fell a little apart from his suite, and had occasion to loosen some part of his armor. He did not return, and his guards entered the copse where he had sought retirement for a moment. The unfortunate man was in the act of expiring, with the dagger of the holy vim in his body, and his sentence attached to the weapon. Looking round in all directions, they could distinguish a masked man retreating at a slow pace, but no one dared to follow him. See this, man? A masked man, an apparition, stabbed him with a dagger, with the citation placed between his body, right, between the blade and the body. And the citation was to let you know what he did. Okay? So this is how the Holy Vim got down, man. This is the secret council of the free judges. You know what I'm talking about? Alright. So this is the scripture here, man. Genesis 49:6, man. I bring this out. I keep bringing it out just to hammer it in the head, man. Show you. This is fact. Genesis 49:6, O my soul, come not down into their secret unto their assembly, man. So they had secret courts during the Dark Ages called the Holy Vim. Right? Behem. Which goes back to the word Genesis 49:7. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, right? So they executed fierce judgment, harsh judgment, vehement, right? Vehement. Fierce, right, is the word 5794, H5794. Eyes, which goes back to Isaiah's, right? Strong, vehement, harsh. Behem, see, vehement, vehement, vehement courts, harsh. So they executed judgment in a harsh manner, man. This is why you see the dagger in the victim of the Holy Vim. Okay. Now this is, again, a letter of the secret tribunals. It says Charlemagne says that historian, having conquered the Saxons, settled in Westphalia. See, Westphalia, that's what we just was reading about. Compelled them to relinquish the worship of idols and to embrace the Christian religion. But as they frequently apostatized and disregarded their oaths with a view of preventing. So this was the point, man, to get rid of all the paganism that was taking place in the Dark Ages. It says, but as they frequently apostatized and disregarded their oaths with a view of preventing rebellion, through dread of punishment, he appointed secret judges. When he empowered to punish persons guilty of perjury, fraud, or any flagitious crime without any previous citation and without permitting them to make any defense. But as this power was likely to be abused, he chose for this purpose men of integrity, who would not be likely to punish the innocent, And as in the consequence of this appointment, many nobles and persons of inferior rank were found hung in the woods without any previous accusation. Okay, so there was a chance that they would still be killing or putting to death innocent people, right? It says, many nobles and persons of inferior rank were found hung in the woods without any previous accusation. Okay, so hanging from trees is another way they executed their criminals. Okay, this is the secret societies of all ages. Page 228, it says a knife was stuck in the tree on which the person had been hanged to indicate that he had suffered the death at the hands of the holy Vim. If the victim resisted, he was slain with daggers, but the slayer left his weapon in the wound to convey the same information. Okay, so it's the same thing, man. Same way of executing judgment. It says here, without any previous accusation, this summary mode of proceeding struck terror into the Westphalians and kept them in due obedience. A general belief was also prevalent that those who suffered this ignominious death had renounced the Christian faith or committed some atrocious crime. This tribunal has continued even to this time and is called secret. Right? Those who preside over it are called scabini or assessors, and it is probable that they are desirous to extend their jurisdiction over all Germany. They perform secret rites and carry on hidden mysteries according to which they judge malefactors, and no one has yet been found who has been induced either by fear or bribes to reveal the secret. The greatest part of the judges are unknown. They make a progress through the provinces, accuse the criminals before this awful tribunal, and prove their allegation by oath. See? Prove their allegation by oath. So they were using these oath skulls. Remember, I brought that out in the last lesson. Just like the Abakuria. So it ties hand in hand. It goes together, man. These had to be the same people. It says the names of the condemned are written in a book, and their execution is entrusted to the younger assessors. Right? That would be like the young men, the cattle raiders. The young cattle raiders right here, man. Can't make this stuff up, man. It says the accused, ignorant of his condemnation, is punished wherever he is found. Alright? This tribunal is degenerated, for persons of the lowest condition are admitted and presumed to meddle with civil affairs when their power ought to be solely confined to criminal proceedings. Sufficient traces of these tribunals appear in the early ages of the German history, and Conrad II, Emperor of Germany, Alright, it says in early times the assessors were usually persons of probity and intelligence, but afterwards men of low birth were admitted, who abused their powers and took cognizance of crimes not amenable before the secret tribunal. They were frequently condemned for their misconduct and for having punished the innocent for the sake of private revenge or for the sake of plunder. Okay? So for the sake of plunder, man, they use their court systems to what? Like the Abakuria, they use their court systems to raid, man. To raid or plunder people's property or wealth. So they use their court systems to invert justice in favor of their own personal gain, man. Right? Like the Abakuria, they use their 5 institutions of the conflict management system for their own benefit. Right? Remember, if they were suffering unduly, they would encourage the young men to raid cattle. So this is the same sort of thing that they were doing right here. They could bring you up on charges on something you did not do, bring you to court, put you to death, and take your stuff for the sake of plunder, man. For raiding. Alright? Same thing, man. It says here in 1535, an edict issued by Charles V only condemns the abuses but does not venture to abolish these courts. And so late as 1640, Thomas Schilstein, Councillor of State to the Elector of Brandenburg, drew out an accusation against the city of Hotheaded for the injustice and cruelty of their secret tribunal. See that cruelty, man? Right? In which he describes the dreadful enormities practiced in their criminal trials, displays the extraordinary modes of proceeding, and exhibits a curious specimen of the mysterious expressions which were used on those occasions. It says, the burgomaster, he says, assessors and councillors continue to this day the use of the secret tribunal. They employ certain signs and marks by which they understand each other as SSGG, stock, stone, grass, green. Alright? Now that's the same thing that is spoken about in this article, The Secret Societies of All Ages. Alright. Let me find that real quick. It's page 224. It says here, the initiated had a secret language. At least we may infer so from the initials SSSGG. So it's 3 S's instead of just 2. Found in Vemic writings preserved in the archives of Herford in Westphalia, that has puzzled the learned, and by some are explained as meaning stockstein, strict, grass, grain, stick, stone, cord, grass, wall. Alright? So that was their kind of like their secret language. What it mean? Who knows, man? Who knows? Alright? So yeah, I found this too also in the book here. This is from a book called Das Gremnis, Der Runen, The Secret of the Runes by Guido Von from page 6. So this is the Vem Cross, which is the Iron Cross. And it has the SSGG on it. Okay. So yeah, man. If they had this symbol, right? If they had this engraved on skulls, just like the inscription of Jesus of Nazareth, all right, then you know they was using it to swear in. Okay? They were using it to take oaths on a skull. This is what they was doing, man. Alright, so they employed certain signs and marks, right? Initials. So let's go back to a letter. Alright, they employ certain signs and marks by which they understand each other as SSGG, stock, stone, grass, green, right? Just like this. Just like this, man. Stock, stone, grass, green. Vim cross. From Das Geheimnis. The Runen, the secret of the runes. Okay? Page 6. Right, so this is what they employ. Now, it mentioned Charles V, right? Charles V. Who was Charles V? Let's get that. So let's see who Charles V is. Look at all these whitewashed images of Charles V. Look at these, man. Do you think any of these is Charles V? Let's see here. Keep going. Alright. Is this Charles V, man? Are these more mulatto-ized depictions accurate? All albino lies, right? I'm gonna get right to it, man. So he's on this painting right here, and that was founded in Lima, Peru. I'm gonna get right to it, man. So this is the real Charles V right here, man. This photo right here is Charles V. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, 1500 to 1558, right? So like I said, man, the Germans was black during the Dark Ages. Now let's go back to this, man. 1535, right? Ain't that what we're reading about? So he was the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V from 1500 to 1558. So we reading about some black history here, man, right? In 1535, an edict issued by Charles V only condemns the abuses. So he condemned the abuses, right, of the vehement courts, the vehement courts, the vehement courts, man. But does not venture to abolish these courts. And so late as 1640, Thomas Schilstein, Council of the State to the Elector of Brandenburg, drew out an accusation. Alright. So, we know for a fact, man, the Dark Ages were being ran by so-called black people. Alright. So down here, oftentimes, persons of property, right, are arrested and tried for a capital crime on the oath of one of their debtors, or any person who offers their information and examination are made by unknown signs and mysterious words, and the unfortunate prisoner is subjected to ordinary and extraordinary torture. See, man? ordinary and extraordinary torture. Right? Genesis 49:7, cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel, man. You know what I mean? Right? Subjected to ordinary and extraordinary torture against the nature of criminal justice and the constitutions of Charles V, man. So they did things against what the Roman emperor wanted. This was later on. See, the whole tribunal got corrupted. When it was first instituted with Charlemagne, it was doing some good. But later on, through the Dark Ages, it got corrupted, man. All right. It says whenever judicial trials are carried on in secret or submitted to the decision of the poor and the ignorant, the most fatal perversion of justice must be the inevitable consequence, particularly in cases where the property of the accused is liable, on conviction, to be confiscated and divided among the judges. You see this, man? Just like what I read earlier. They're using their court system to confiscate goods, man. Right? But the person could be innocent. You know, that's the thing. That's the thing about these courts, man. These secret courts. So, you know, it's something you gotta be watchful of, man. You know. Alright, Genesis 49, verse 7, cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Alright, let me just read this real quick. Show you one of the methods they put people to death, man. Alright, called kissing the virgin. Kissing the virgin. Alright, this is a cruel manner of a death sentence right here. It says right here, there is a tradition that one of the methods of putting to death persons condemned to that fate by the secret tribunals was the following. It says, the victim was told to go and kiss the statue of the Virgin which stood in a subterranean vault. The statue was of bronze and gigantic size. On approaching it, so as to touch it, its front opened with folding doors and displayed its interior set full with sharp and long spikes and pointed blades. See this, man? Instruments of cruelty. The doors were similarly armed, and on each, about the height of a man's head, was a spike longer than the rest, the two spikes being intended when the doors were shut to enter the eyes and destroy them. Dang. I showed you that in the movie The Phantom that came out in 1996. Go watch that if you don't believe me. Alright? Matter of fact, hold on, man. Let me get it real quick. Alright, so like I said, man. Right, the spikes go into the eyes, right? It shows you that in the movie The Phantom. Alright. This is off reddit.com. Alright, spoilers. The Phantom 96. The microscope scene. So in this scene right here, dude puts his eyes to the microscope. Alright. And then the two knives or blades come up and stab him in the eyes, man. Why is all of this in the movie The Phantom if the Phantom had nothing to do with Simeon and Levi, the Apocuria, right? The Maasai, the people on the east coast of Kenya and Tanzania, also referred to as the Bandar tribe in the story of the Phantom, man. Come on, man. This is everything coming full circle and making sense. Right? It's all being tied together. Right? So again, it says here, the doors were similarly armed, and on each, about the height of a man's head, was a spike longer than the rest, the two spikes being intended when the doors were shut to enter the eyes and destroy them. Cruel, man. The doors having thus opened the victim by a secret mechanism, see? Secret mechanism. They into these mechanisms, man. Conflict mechanism, management mechanism, whatever you want to call it, man. Okay? They got these mechanisms, man. Right? It said the doors having thus opened the victim by a secret mechanism was drawn or pushed into the dreadful statue, and the doors closed upon him. There he was cut and hacked by the knives and spikes, and in about half a minute the floor on which he stood, which was in reality a trap door, opened and allowed him to fall through. But more horrible torture awaited him, for underneath the trap door were 6 large wooden cylinders, disposed in pairs one below the other. There were thus 3 pairs. The cylinders were furnished all round with sharp blades. The distance between the uppermost pair of parallel cylinders was such that a human body could just lie between them. The middle pair was closer together, and the lowest very close. Beneath this horrible apparatus was an opening in which could be heard the rushing of water. Right? The mechanism that opened the doors of the statue also set in motion the cylinders, which turned towards the inside. Hence, when the victim, already fearfully mangled and blinded, fell through the trap door, he fell between the upper pair of cylinders and was thus drawn in between them, his body being cut on all sides by the knives set round the cylinders. Hey, see this? Get that again, man. Genesis 49:7. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel, man. It says, in this mutilated condition, the quivering mass fell between the second and more closely approaching pair of cylinders, and was now actually hacked through, and thrown on the lowest and closest pair, where it was reduced to small pieces, which fell into the brook below, and were carried away, thus leaving no trace of the awful deed that had been accomplished, man. You see this, man? Kiss the virgin. Which is probably a salute and memorial to Dinah, man. Right? In remembrance of Dinah, right? They do this, the kissing the virgin execution. In remembrance of Dinah, and salute and memorial to Dinah, man. Right? Kissing the virgin, man. This is what it is, man. Why would they call it kissing the virgin? Because Simeon and Levi, when you read the story, is associated with their sister Dinah and what they did to avenge her, right, was considered by Jacob to be cruel and wrathful, man. Right? Cursed be the anger, for it was fierce, and the wrath, for it was cruel. Alright? Read verse 6. It says, O my soul, come not down to their secret unto their assembly. Mine honor be not thou united. For in their anger they slew a man. They slew more than one man, though. Right? And in their self-will they dig down a wall. Okay? They dig down a wall, man. What's that talking about? Footnote letter F, man. They hocked oxen, man. again, that cattle reference. Okay? Kiss the Virgin, man. A memorial to Dinah. In my opinion. Alright? So yeah, you know the Abacuria, or the Simeon and Levi are known to be hot-headed. Let me show you this real quick. Maybe y'all could hear this. Hold on. So this is the Kissy tribe, man, which is one of the tribes of Simeon, right? It's the brother Joseph's Instagram page right here, right? Sub-Sahara Israelites. That's him right there, the brother Joseph. Okay. So yeah, man. Let me go down here to Simeon. Okay, so you got in Tanzania, you got the Kissy, right? And in Kenya, you got Kissy. Alright? So let me show you the Kissy right here, man. Amongst that is part of Simeon. They say that they have a stereotype among them of being hot-headed. Is this true?
You know, the people of Kisii are known for, and that is one thing that, you know, the people of Kisii are known for and are proud of, as a matter of fact. But there's something else that has been considered a stereotype, and that is high tempers or hot temperedness.
The Kisii people are also known for having a hot temper. Let's find out if they agree and if they think it's a fair judgment.
Kweli Wakisii wanakaa na hasira, lakini inafuata ni nini imewaturika wakuwe na hiyo hasira. Hakuna mtu mwenye hawezi kuwa na hasira.
Of course to some extent ni ukweli, lakini pia ni perception yenye watu wako nayo. Wale wa Kisii, tuseme wale wa mama wetu, hasira ukikosa hiyo asile hiyo kukombanisha. I think hiyo perception ilitoka huko wa Kisii wako na hasira. Lakini generally to some extent hawana hasira sana.
Ukimchokoza Mkisii anakuanga na hasira.
I think wamezaliwa akiwa nayo. Ni kitu iko ndani yao.
Hasira inakuanga sana. Especially kutuma fair. Unajua Mkisii? Unajua atakangi kufeli. Mazee na umanga sana. Lakini vitu zingine naonanga tuko sawa.
So there's a guy Okusa spoke to, and he said, of course, when you send fair and she doesn't come,
And
so the fact that they being considered hot-headed, or if that's a stereotype among them, showing that their characteristics and attributes is lining up with the scriptures, man. Right? Let me get something else. This is agricultural history. This is talking about one of the chiefs. Agricultural history of the Abacuria, page 781. This is talking about one of the chiefs, right? That was being appointed head over his people in a certain district or region. It says, in the same year, the quiet and industrious chief Chacha Nyasoko was appointed to head the Nyabasi location, while Mokono was appointed chief of Uregi, although he was described as hot-headed. See that, man? So this attribute is not a fictional thing, man. It's considered to be an attribute among these people, to be hot-headed, to have a fierce type of anger, man. Right? According to the scriptures. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Now it says, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. What's that going into? What is that going into, man? This is detention without trial, deportation, and security among the Kuria of Tanzania. All right. So there was deportation efforts taking place among the Abakuria, Maasai, all of the other tribes that are relevant to Simeon. All right, to get them out of the areas and regions that they were, accused of cattle raiding. So this is how they will be divided in Jacob and scattered in Israel. They will be deported. All right. Let me just read some of this, man, and I'm going to close out. All right. It says here, in 1921 and 1923, the British introduced deportation ordinances in Tanganyika and Kenya, respectively. The deportation ordinances empowered the governor to detain anybody and deport him or her from one part of the territory to another if he was satisfied that the conduct of such a person threatened the territory's peace and good order. The deportation ordinance of 1921 was followed by another law, which is called the Expulsion of Undesirable Persons Ordinance of 1930. The Expulsion Ordinance also empowered the governor of Tanganyika to expel any person who was deemed to be undesirable in connection to public good and moral conduct. The expulsion of undesirable persons also involved the detention of expellees while waiting for the completion of the expulsion procedure. So they could detain them and hold them while the whole process of the deportation was taking place. All right. So that's how they would get divided and scattered in Israel, man, through deportation efforts that started with the colonists in the late 1800s. All right, it says the British colonial government used the ordinances as a weapon to curb African resistance and actions it deemed as criminal or antisocial. Or maybe in other words, if they didn't want to work their job to empower their economy. Okay? Because they was already social and doing things for themselves before they got there. You see what I'm saying? Many people, including local chiefs whom the government thought were threatening peace and the survival of the colonial government, were detained and deported. For example, Zayota Humbi, an ex-chief of Usungo and Nzega, was detained and then deported to Kilwa in 1923 for political reasons. See, that ain't had nothing to do with cattle raiding. They just wanted to use this as an excuse to deport people that was in competition against their governmental moves, man. You know? Some were targeted because of ritual and medical practices deemed criminal by the colonial state. Amri Makwera was deported from Kilosa to Tabora in 1957 for witchcraft. Alright, Makwera was believed to be a popular local medicine man who attracted many clients. Remember, I brought out part of the Avaragoli was you had medicine men, man. And when I brought out the Phantom story, among the Bantar, you had medicine men as well. Right? So these were the reasons why they was being deported, being scattered in Israel. Because when they get scattered, they end up being among other tribes of Israel. All right? Said most of the detention and deportation of the Kuria in Tanzania was done in the post-colonial period, specifically from the 1960s to the 1980s, unlike other parts of Tanzania where the practice targeted opponents of the existing government. You see, only experienced Kuria cattle raiders whose undertaking instigated inter-clan conflicts and affected the security of Mara region were detained and deported. So I guess in Tanzania they held true to their real intentions of deporting the people for. All right. Well, not all of Tanzania, like it's saying. Okay. Just in some parts. All right. See, that ain't good enough, you know. But continuing on here, let me just continue to read. All right. It says here, the minutes of the meetings of North Mara Council indicate that throughout the 1960s, members of the council were anonymously insisting on detaining and deporting cattle raiders so as to restore peace and security in their area. It says on 13 November 1989, the Bunda Ward Development Committee in Bunda District, Mara region recommended the deportation of 3 people because of their engagement in cattle raiding. In the 1990s, the Tarimi District Commissioner also circulated plans for arresting and exiling suspected cattle raiders to end cattle raiding and restore peace in the district. Okay, so that was another reason for that was the main reason they were supposed to be deporting them. All right, down here in conclusion. It says detention and deportation practices had far-reaching outcomes among the Kuria of Tanzania. The practices started in the 1920s but were intensified among the Kuria from the 1960s to the 1980s. Unlike in other parts of Tanzania where detention and deportation targeted political activists and opponents of the government, in Ukuria, the practices targeted notorious cattle raiders, and in most cases people were arrested before the president issued a written order as the Detention and Deportation Acts required. While cattle theft seemed to be an ongoing phenomenon among the Kuria, detention and deportation were done in such a piecemeal fashion that they could not keep up with the pace of the crimes. So it wasn't enough being done to keep up with the cattle raiding, man. You might as well not do nothing about it. But continuing on, it says detention and deportation practices could not eradicate cattle raiders, who according to the provisions of Section 2 of the Acts were considered to be among the individuals whose conduct could endanger peace and security or cause enmity between members of the general public. All right. So yeah, that's the whole. That's what this is what fulfills the scripture here. All right, Genesis 49 verse 7. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Okay. But again, the efforts really didn't do anything to put a damper on the cattle raiding. All right. But for the sake of prophecy, it still happened. It was still something that occurred to fulfill what the scriptures is saying. All right. So with that, I want to say peace and blessings to the hopeful elect. All praises, glory, honor, and thanksgiving to Yahweh, Bahashem HaMashiach Yahushai. Shalom.